Ladies and gentlemen, we hope that a few more people will join us before too long, but we're going to start right now. I think everyone is interested in hearing our guests speak. Thank you for coming to the second but not last part of today's plenary session. We'd like to build on the topics that were discussed in the first part of the plenary session. We're living through a revolution right now, and in terms of how we communicate, how we buy things, how we exchange information, in terms of how we trade securities, how we trade secrets sometimes, how we trade jokes with each other. We've come up with amazing ways to save money and save ourselves time. Maybe some of you remember what it used to be like to pay for communal services, коммунальные услуги, back in the day. Now you tap some buttons or just set it up with your bank and no cash needed, everything is done for you. But it also creates risks. And we have a very distinguished panel today of 4 gentlemen I will introduce in just a moment to discuss how government and business can work together to apply technology, technological innovation, to work efficiently and equitably. We'd like them to address what does this digital revolution we're living in mean for public policy and business? Please welcome our guests. Our panelists include Herman Gref. He's the former Russian economy minister and the current Sberbank CEO who has transformed Russia's biggest bank. We have Mr. Vitor Gaspar, who is the head of the IMF's Fiscal Affairs Department, editor of a fascinating book out on fiscal politics, how behavior is affecting some of the decisions that are being made, and a new book coming out in November, I understand, about the digital revolution and its impact on public finances. We have Mr. Mikhail Mishustin, who is the head of Russia's Federal Tax Service. And we have one of the most senior officials at Finland's Finance Ministry, Mr. Martti Hetemäki. Please welcome our panelists. We're looking forward to hearing from each one. I would like to start off by asking Mr. Gref. You've modernized Sberbank. You have looked at using blockchain to perhaps not full success yet, but certainly some ideas about that. You served in government working to reform tax and customs. Can you please tell us a little bit about how what your vision is of how new technologies are changing business and competition and the interplay of government and business?
Thank you so much to the Ministry of Finance for the organization of this great forum. It is growing at a high rate. Thank you for inviting me to this panel discussion. And thank you to all the participants for staying here after the first part of the session. It's not easy. I'm just fresh from the airport, just came back from Vladivostok. But just to brighten up our interaction, I prepared a couple of slides. Could you please show them to everyone? I'm sure you will enjoy the pictures rather than just listening to me. But I will try to comment those pictures, those images. I have 7 slides in total. So number 1, today, Klaus Schwab has issued a very interesting book, The Fourth Industrial Revolution. And this slide demonstrates the fourth industrial revolution, which is in full swing. And today, this is certainly not only digitalization, although digitalization is the major and the most global trend that affects any change in the world economy, but we will certainly talk about other technological changes which include the concept of the fourth industrial revolution. What is digitalization? Digitalization is a lot of technology trends and capabilities which affect everyone. When we say something out of those circles on the slides may be interesting to you personally, and some of them you will not use, this is not the right thing to put it. We will use all of it, and I don't see any difference in using those technology by individuals or by the public sector, by the private sector or by the public sector. It works the same for everyone. All these technologies should be applied in an integrated fashion because they depend on each other. Digitalization. What is most important about it? Digitalization is convenience for the end user. It's comfort for the end user. Digitalization should put an end to any intermediary, any agent, and put an end to instructions. Let's take any process of today which in this or that way affects the interests of citizens, any process, regardless of what it is, paying taxes or relationship with the budget or any other government or public service. So both subjects should had to learn a lot of paper instructions defining or describing processes. The digital world helps us get rid of this. We don't need to think about it. Both the suppliers of services and recipients of services, they do not need to study paper documentation. This becomes really convenient. It's good for the user. It's easy. The way we use devices, none of us has read an instruction on how to use an iPhone, for instance, but somehow we can use it. We probably do not use 100% of its functions, but nevertheless, from time to time, I do get some videos explaining new functions, but still it does not prevent me from enjoying and using the device. Well, I believe that our future is to turn our relationship with the government into such a convenient and comfortable form. The key trend in digitalization is big data. Big data is using the technology of big data by the government. We see that the key owner of big data is the government, and this will remain in the future. The most inefficient analyst of those big data is the government again. But the first experiments in this area, experiments in the financial sector, the Minister of Finance, the Treasury, and the Federal Tax Service as a pioneer of those initiatives demonstrates how drastically the relationship between the agent and the recipient of the service change, and how much the relationship between the government and the business and the government and the individual change. I'm sure big data analysis and total use of finances, the biggest change there will be disruptive technologies. We may get away from the huge and clumsy government structure and address a lot of issues that we mentioned: subsidizing, using tax preferences. We can have a look at, take a perspective on equality very differently through big data analytics. We see that we can improve efficiency of government structures, starting from the judicial system, law enforcement, or any other government entities which absorb a lot of public finances. The key trend here is democratization of the information. Democratization of information is the trend that during the 5 following years defined the development of public finances and the society in general. This trend needs a lot of attention, much more than we pay to it today. One more trend that follows from digitalization is a brand new approach to human resources. It is impossible to work in a new environment without having adequate skills, appropriate skills, requirements to education, requirements to vocational training and retraining of both civil servants and any other employees in small or medium-sized businesses is a challenge for everyone. Competition for resources is growing. Competition for talents is growing. And it's obvious that the public sector may be losing this battle. It is bureaucratic. It doesn't offer high salaries. So these are the things to be overcome in the future. The government has huge potential. The government is the biggest owner of big data. It can offer the most interesting, the most large-scale projects of transformation for young people. And this will require revisiting the system of incentives for young people who come to become civil servants. They need to be goal-oriented, they need to be performance-oriented, or rather than anything else that may lead, as we know, to certain corruption scandals. We face a lot of challenges and dangers as we transition to digitalization. If we put them on a scale and we try to demonstrate it in numbers, you will see that the benefits of digitalization outweigh all the threats and possible losses that we may have as those threats may deploy even at the worst case scenario. Let's have a look at the GDP structure of Russia. We see the lagging structure, the service structure. So the contribution of services into the GDP is insufficient. How to grow beyond 2% of GDP? Here there are 2 drivers of growth, small and medium-sized business and the service sector. We need to have a look at the services sector from the international global perspective. This slide demonstrates the key limitations in this sector that needs to be overcome for us to exploit the available potential. So we need not only to provide services domestically, but internationally as well. Here is a quote of a scientist, George Westerman, from MIT. So it is very important to take an integrated approach to this process. And we need to take very accurate steps. So no one wants to be a crawling caterpillar. Everyone wants to be a flying butterfly. Well, I think this may lead to a longer and separate discussion. We certainly do have negative experiences of digitalization. Blockchain was mentioned as well. Sberbank and me personally, have accumulated a lot of mistakes towards blockchain implementation. I'm not sure whether we have more victories than losses, but in the future, I think we would like to create the library of mistakes as we go along the digitalization path, to share them with other companies. I cannot always say which way we should go, and in many cases, I can't say where we should not go, because we've gone there and we didn't like it.
And the last thing that I would like to say, one of the key words that we must practice in the age of digitalization is collaboration. Minister of Finance said that the Ministry of Finance acts like sculptor, cutting off the redundancies. It would be very good if we do it together. We have a giant infrastructure in the country which is redundant. And if we consider our back offices, there is so much redundancy here at every ministry, at every small company, big company. They act on their own and they're non-competitive at all. So the first thing that we should do, we should learn how to collaborate with each other, and then the huge volume of those redundancies will disappear immediately. And we are 2 steps back in this process because we did not learn to centralize our services. However, the world is aiming at decentralization now. So we must do our best through collaboration, through understanding of the huge redundancy of infrastructure in our country, where we spend huge money, private and public. I would not put a line between them in the long run. This is all money of the society, and this is an extremely non-productive spending of the GDP. So we must think about combining the private and public infrastructures in order to reduce non-productive costs. This will be the first step towards our success, and I should say that we are ready for that. We are the owners of one of the main back offices in our country, and we now go for a major reduction here, using more and more digital solutions. We would be very sorry if we have to fire thousands of people. So we would like to do something about it.
To have Sberbank become one of the instruments for helping streamline some of the ministries. I think this is a good moment to turn to Mr. Gaspar, who, as I mentioned, is working on, with his colleagues, are working on a book about the digital revolution. What are the opportunities and what are the greatest threats inherent in this revolution that you've seen, you've had experience across the world?
Let me start by thanking the Russian Ministry of Finance for having me in this exceptionally interesting panel to talk about a topic I'm absolutely passionate about. I will want to persuade you that this is not only extremely interesting, you clearly got that from Herman Graf, but extremely important for public policy in general and ministries of finance in particular. So 2 remarks on threats, many remarks on opportunities, and if you allow me, I will even give some concrete examples. but you will be the judge whether I'm taking too much time. So typically, when you talk about digital revolutions in the public sector, people regard digital revolutions as threats. And why is that? Because, as you've heard in the previous panel, technological change increases the pace of change in society. The type of technological change that we are experiencing right now may exacerbate problems of distribution of income. The fiscal monitor that we will put out in the annual meetings of the fund is about inequality, and we'll be looking in depth into that. And so there is an increased demand for public intervention and public support. At the same time, technological possibilities, the possibility of delocalization of economic activity, the possibility of remote provision of services, the possibility of direct transactions between economic agents without using traditional means of payment, all of that potentially increases opportunities for tax evasion and tax avoidance, and so erode the resources that can serve those same public policies. There seems to be a gap here. And that's a fundamental challenge that can even be seen as a threat. But I don't think that this is the correct way of looking at the problem. The correct way of looking at the problem is thinking that public administrations have lots of opportunities to use the possibilities afforded by the new technology, and there are lots of complementarities between what is going on or what may be going on in the public sector, in public administration, in private sector, and in some areas of the private sector like the financial system, and in civil society in general. This is, as Herman Graf was saying, a systemic change. Societies will be very different in a few years' time. And it is crucial that public administration, the public sector, government, politics are part of this change. And that's why we we're going to put out in mid-November a book called Digital Revolutions in Public Finance. That's a joint project by the International Monetary Fund and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And because of the generous funding from the foundation, the book will be available free of charge on the website of the IMF. Now, in that book, we review completely the landscape of possibilities for public policies that have to be, as was referred already in the previous panel and by Herman Graf, they have to be smart policies. These smart fiscal policies are policies that facilitate change, that facilitate transformation, that complement and use what is going on in the private sector, complement and use what is going on in society. And we have examples of these smart policies going on around the world, sometimes with quite impressive examples. We have examples in the book about Kenya, we have examples in the book about India, we have Brazil, we have Indonesia, we have Estonia, and many other countries. Let me just tell you one example, if I may.
Yes.
1 year ago, in a conference organized by the IMF, the Richard Good Lecture. Richard Good was the first director of the Fiscal Affairs Department of the fund. He was a long director, was there for more than 10 years. He really made the Fiscal Affairs Department referenced in the fund. And in this Richard Good lecture, Esther Duflo, also an economist from MIT, exactly like the scientist that you quoted, delivered a lecture on the economist as plumber, laying the pipes, fixing the leaks. So this idea of the economist as a plumber is exactly the same as the image that the finance minister was using when he said that the staff of the Ministry of Finance were craftsmen, people who have a strong control, a strong grasp of detail, people who can put in place systems that actually deliver, systems that actually work. One needs to be able to grasp the details. For these digital revolutions, we need visionaries, and I would regard my neighbor Herman Gref as definitely a visionary, a man who grasps the big picture. We need architects, that is, people who design policies for the new environment, and we need plumbers, people who actually go to the nitty-gritty details and make sure that it works. Now, Esther Duflo and people from her team did look at detailed experiences that went on in India. And one of these experiences had to do with a program, a very important program in India, in rural areas, that is a labor workfare program. So the program allows rural households to have up to 10 working days per year of work which is paid, subsidized by the public sector. Historically, this program was plagued by corruption. Much of the money was not actually transferred to the intended recipients. It was lost in the process. Those were the leaks. And since the program was not effective, the intended results were not in place. Now, India has one of the most ambitious programs of digital transformation in place anywhere in the world, and a cornerstone of that is the Aadhaar identification process, which allows for biometric identification of people. People have a unique Aadhaar number, a unique identification number, and they're identified by their biometric characteristics. So this workfare program was matched with a smart card that allowed for biometric validation of the identity of the people concerned and electronic payments. And what happened was that the leakage in the system was reduced by amazing amounts. So the leakages were fixed. But this was done in a randomized experiment way, so it was possible to measure exactly the effects, not only on the public sector process, but also on the allocation of resources. And it turned out that once the transfers reached the actual workers, the bargaining power of the workers in the labor market improved, and so wages increased. And the leakages, considerable as they were only 10% of the gains for the households that were resident in the areas concerned. So what is my bottom line here? Technology, as the quotation from the scientist made clear, is not an end in itself. Technology will do what we will collectively make it do, and we must go through the details and work the systemic implications of the transformations that we trigger. But the potential is immense, and this is just one of many examples that you can collect from around the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The idea of improving wages, the idea of an easy way to make people's lives better simply by plugging some of the spending leaks, by making the processes easier, is a fantastic vision. You also mentioned the collection of data, biometric prints. This also creates great concerns among many people about privacy and what happens if you have a government that is not necessarily friendly to certain elements. Can you talk about the risk of that?
Oh, absolutely. So clearly, the use of information technology must be accompanied by guarantees of privacy, guarantees that information is not going to be misused. And I think that that is probably the point that makes it clearer that it's up to us collectively and as societies to use technology in a way that serves our purposes. We must understand that technology is not a panacea. We're not going to have our basic problems solved by technology, but we will be able to use technology to solve our problems.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mishustin. Mr. Mishustin, you've created a platform that has helped plug a lot of leaks. You've created a tax platform that is almost a pleasure to use, if one can say that about paying taxes. But you've made it much easier, and you've made great steps. You're also working with the OECD on issues of tax administration. Could you please speak about some of the trends you're seeing in the future?
Спасибо, спасибо. Мне очень понравилось выражение.
Thank you. I liked the plumbers comparison used by the previous speakers, plumbers of digitalization. So if we speak about all the challenges and things implemented by the tax service, we started in a simple way as we were mastering the technologies and progressing. We were a slow worm, and then we grew wings, and then we took off, and we are flying now as the number of technological changes that we have implemented made us digitalize our services and change the attitude of the taxpayers, the society. Taxes may be now paid in a comfortable for the population, for the people way. Let me share some slides with you. German Gref spoke about the breakthrough technologies, innovative technologies. This is what completely changes the basis, the foundation. The companies that used to be leaders in the market, they become extinct because of a dozen of young guys who created a totally different platform and developed a different view on a product or service. And the tax service, we are in the center of these breakthrough technologies. It's an opportunity and a possibility for us. If we speak about the new generation, they are digitally smart. They use gadgets. Young people, they will not spend too much time on filling out their tax declaration or on procedures, so they're intolerant to delays in getting actual data. They're able to navigate through any gadgets, widgets, and that creates a totally new demand to the services, for the services rendered by the government. Of course, we must mention data in this context.
Data is the center of new technology, of informatization. They can spread with the speed of light. They may be unstructured, they may be copied, they become public immediately. This gives rise to a lot of challenges on how we work with data, what we do with the data. We discuss the natural environment for taxpayers. The digital maturity of taxpayers generates the need for easy and comfortable use. Let's talk about the government. If the government doesn't enter this natural environment, it will have a hard time competing for that taxpayer and the citizen. So we should not be different from Sberbank in terms of using new technologies. Together with Mr. Gref, we talk about the same technologies, how agile we should become, how adapt to new changes to avoid excessive spending. So this gives rise to very new requirements. Open data, open interfaces, a different perspective on the services that the government is supposed to provide. I will talk about taxes in a minute. What big breakthrough technologies can help us? Here, we have collected the information from tax revenue services across the world. We have had a look to understand what are the main breakthrough technologies used by tax administrations of different companies. Well, this is basically the same of what big companies like Sberbank say. Number one is big data, creation of uniform platforms. Number two is smart portals. The portals which offer the single point of entry to electronic services. When the Apple technology was developed by Steve Jobs, iTunes, an application store where all applications are bought, the single point of entry provided a very good and useful approach. So this portal approach, single taxpayers account, gives us a strong competitive advantage. So we do compete for taxpayers the same as we do compete for investments. Then come mobile technologies. The young generation is in the gadgets. They will not read newspapers. I'm not sure if they're going to watch TV, but I'm sure our kids will use gadgets, and unless we're with them in their natural environment, it's hard to make them law obedient and taxpayers in good standing. Then follows big data, Internet of Things. By 2020, online Internet of Things will account for $200 million of revenue. This will require more and more assessment and evaluation of big data. I have a 2-minute video, but let me first briefly explain what we did in the tax system. Automated VAT reimbursement system, 6 million of declarations for VAT in 7 time zones in online. We monitor all this, anything related to VAT payment and reimbursement, and the collection of the past 4 years, the collection that has improved was largely due to the new tools that we decided to use. Please have a look at the numbers today. So over the past period, the average growth has been about 15% over 4 years. Online cash devices, which generates information and sends the information to data centers. This is a good tool for future analytics, for keeping track of trading flows. Mr. Gref is right when he says that we do not use big data efficiently, but we are trying to do our best. We're working hard on it. Marking of products. We have known it for many years, but cumulatively, the right marking helps us keep track of all material flows and compare them with the financial flows. And one more important example, how technologies help us address compliance, for example, compliance in tax paying. For instance, it is possible to pay a VAT for companies which are not registered in Russia, such as Google, Apple, and any others like that, which provide services to individuals. So by using those electronic services, we can impose VAT on the services of those companies. And we generated about 5 billion rubles because companies are ready to meet those requirements. We need to live in their environment and find the right approach to them. So all these breakthrough technologies helps us talk about totally new analytics. There is yet effort to think about big data and make it convenient and useful for the government. Let me also show you a 2-minute video, but before that I would like to say that by using these new technologies we are trying to become a provider of trust on behalf of the government. A recent poll has been made to understand which services, which agency are the most trustworthy from the citizens' point of view. And many citizens said it's the tax inspection. And we were very pleased to see this because we set clear goals, we demonstrate implementation of those goals, and we make everything comfortable for the taxpayers. I don't know which button I should press to show you the video, but here it is. Digitalization of the economy puts extra requirements to the tax service. The tax service of Russia uses advanced technologies and creates the global analytical system of data. The uniform platform are the data centers which accumulate all information on every taxpayer in the uniform file on the basis of the taxpayer's individual number. Electronic services help address any issue associated with taxes anytime online. Application of big data technology and analytics has brought the VAT payment in reimbursement on a new level. All data on purchases and sales are aligned with the product flows and financial flows. Marking of products helps control the market of fur products and medications on the territory of Eurasian Union. Starting 2017, we have implemented cash desks, online cash desks, which provide information directly to the tax service, which opens new opportunities for the retail sector of the economy. Modern technologies have simplified administration of providers of electronic services like Google and Apple. We have prepared a convenient way for paying taxes online and submitting declarations online. Thanks to the knowledge about foreign accounts, the tax service implements the policies of de-offshoring. The tax service has created a lot of useful registers for keeping track of all information available on the taxpayers. We improve tax discipline, enhance stable tax revenues without increasing the tax rates. So pay the taxes.
Something which I believe is very exciting and I would like to introduce now, which is the possibility of leapfrogging. And I think that actually fits very well now as a sequence to this presentation. If we think about how typically we look at development, we look at a country catching up as a country reproducing the steps that other countries have taken previously. Given the pace of change that we have seen from the two presentations, clearly that's not what's going on now. Countries are leapfrogging. They're not trying to reproduce what others have done. that trying to define the frontier of best practices themselves. Just think about Estonia, who started a process in 2001, and as of today has a unique platform for the interface between citizens and the government. And in that platform, they offer 600 e-services that include the identification of citizens, the interaction on the tax side, exactly as you described, but also, say, the access to medical records. And think about a country that one does not necessarily think as at the borders, at the frontier of innovation. Think about Kenya. In Kenya, they introduced a payment system, M-Pesa, that involved cooperation between the private sector and the central bank as regulator of financial institutions and payment systems. The tax administration then came on top, and they introduced a platform, again, iTax, where the taxpayer can consult all tax records and interact electronically with the tax administration. And given the characteristics of Kenya, M-Pesa is also linked to a system which is M-Services that allow taxpayers to pay taxes electronically, but not only electronically, it's in their mobile phones, because the coverage of mobile phones in Kenya is better than any other type of electronic device. Just see the complementarities that Herman Gref was talking about at play in Kenya.
Thank you very much.
Ну, я не удержусь добавить. Мы имеем 26 миллионов пользователей, которые
Yes, we have 26 million users with personal accounts, and they actually pay with Sberbank online. 26 million Russian people pay income tax, property tax, transport tax, personal income tax through electronic interaction with the tax service directly, as in Kenya.
Let's hear also from our guest from Finland, his experience. He has vast experience, immense practical experience. What do you think about this? Can digitalization also make fiscal policy smarter? How do you measure GDP when we're moving to these new forms in the economy? How do you figure out what people need, how to best serve the needs of the people in the country?
Right, thank you. And thank you for the Russian Finance Ministry for the invitation. This is a very forward-looking, timely, and important event, I think. Now, there's a lot of perhaps unwarranted expectations also regarding the digital development, artificial intelligence, and all that. And often many people talk what can be achieved in a few years' time, what's ahead of us, and I would confine myself to what is possible today and what is being done already today. In the Finnish central government administration, many agencies use extensively AI today, and just to take the example of the tax administration, the Finnish tax administration started to use data mining and AI about 5 years ago. And the AI is used to monitor, for example, filing, reporting, and transactions that taxpayers may make or should make. As a result, high-risk transactions can be flagged for case-specific treatment, while low-risk transactions can move to automated routine processing. AI identifies segment-specific tax compliance profiles in terms of abilities and propensities to comply. Now, the AI tax inspector has certain advantages compared to traditional tax inspector. The AI tax inspector does not make mistakes. It does not need coffee breaks or sleep. And it's not tempted to corruption. I have one specific example how the digital world is making life hard for tax evaders. I visited last November the headquarters of Uber in San Francisco. And they said that since Uber is a cashless operation, you cannot pay Uber taxi with cash. All Uber trips are recorded, the length of the trip, the cost of the trip, the name of the driver, and so on. And Uber, they said to me, have made an agreement with the US tax administration, the Inland Revenue, that each and every Uber trip, the records are handed over to the Inland Revenue. And I think this is something that many other countries could also make use of. It's just a simple example. Now, while taxes are very important for the government, they are still not, however, not the most important place for us to sort of look for savings or money in the government. The most important sector is healthcare. We spend roughly 10% of GDP on healthcare in Finland, and the use of AI, as Herman Gref was saying, is fundamentally based on data. Data is the fuel of AI, and data is the new gold. And we happen to have in Finland a very high quality and very comprehensive data on healthcare. It makes Finland a very interesting place to experiment, to sort of launch new services. And in 2014, GE Health established its health technology center in Helsinki. GE Health Village, that's called. And this year, IBM Watson, the AI arm of IBM, established its technology center in Helsinki. However, the most interesting development in terms of AI and healthcare comes from a very different sector. And the biggest bank in Finland, the OP Bank, has aggressively expanded on healthcare, on provision of healthcare services. It has already a few hospitals, and it's building more hospitals. And what is unique also with this bank is that it combines digitalization with health services. I think it's perhaps the only bank, a major bank in the world which does that. And of course there are some concerns, and the Financial Supervisory Agency in Finland is watching closely what is happening with this bank. I know this because I'm in the board of the Finnish FSA. But on the other hand, it may be a good hedging strategy for this bank, because in the face of these technological developments and the sort of fintech development, it may be a good strategy to
И все это
business model that otherwise may be outdated, may become outdated pretty soon. By the way, in passing, I should note that OP Bank will not be the biggest bank next year because this week the Nordic bank group, Nordea, announced that it will move its headquarters to Helsinki. By the way, because one important reason why they are moving to Helsinki, what they said in the announcement was that Finland is a member of the banking union. Finland is a member of the euro area, which is very close to our heart with Vito Kaspar. Finally, I mean, the government has an important role in establishing platforms in various sectors. We are putting a lot of efforts to establish a platform ecosystem in mobility as a service in the transport sector. We are doing similar things in other sectors as well. And the key here is the government has the data, but the government is also in charge of regulation. And there's lots of regulatory hurdles, obstacles in preventing businesses to utilize new technology and, for example, AI. And recently we have reformed regulation so that there can be experiments on autonomous ships in Finland. Rolls-Royce has launched a project in Finland to experiment with ships without personnel. Finally, of course, there are challenges, and many low-skill but also high-skill jobs will be destroyed by AI. It's clear. And the Finnish government has a strategy that is sort of based on basically three things. First of all, we think that in order to be sure that there will be new work created, new jobs created to substitute for those that will be destroyed by the new technology, one of the key things is to make sure that work pays enough. So we have put a lot of effort in improving work incentives. The other thing that we have been doing and will be doing in the future is to see that areas and competencies where human capital is complementary to new technology are being developed. And therefore things like research and development and in fact all those functions that we have been able to attract to Helsinki and to Finland on healthcare, on the autonomous ships and so on are just in line with that strategy. Third, what we are doing and investing a lot in is education. And there will be new skills required with the advancement of technology. And of course, AI is supposed to make some cognitive skills less useful in the future. There will be lots of redundancies in professions like lawyers, accountants, and so on. At the same time, it's likely that the new technology will stress the importance of non-cognitive skills, like social skills. And this is something that we try to take into account when sort of focusing and thinking where we should invest in terms of human capital creation and education in Finland.
Thank you, Mr. Hetemäki. So, Mr. Graf, healthcare? Is that the next step for Sberbank? I would like to ask you, though, in terms of Sberbank's profitability, if you could just perhaps give an estimate this year, next year, how do you see your profit growing, and how much of that is due to technology? Can you synthesize that?
Ну, есть два тренда.
We encounter two trends here. The banking sector becomes less profitable. If we take Europe, the profitability in Europe is 5 to 7% for the banking, and this is a norm. Given the regulatory barriers that we have, over surveillance and makes people reluctant to invest in the banking sector. We kept looking for an answer for a long time. How do we maintain the profitability of the banking sector, of our banking business? And this is a two-faceted solution. One is abrupt reduction of cost through the implementation of new technologies and sharp reduction in errors in decision making. In our case, this is risk mitigation and reduction of bad assets through the implementation of the new technologies. Both provide for an increase in profitability of 1.5 times. If we consider our cost-to-income ratio, last year it was 38.6%, and we see it as 30% as our target. 9 years ago it was 54%. You may compare it yourself. As you said, we have 30,000 employees, 16,000 in affiliates across Russia. This is a huge organization. As for the risk management, we're now 1.5 times better in risk management as compared to other banks, and that is thanks to the modern technologies that we employ. Many decisions are made automatically without human involvement. And the last point, it's my response to your remark about healthcare. Yes, indeed, we enter the healthcare. We have identified the most attractive areas for us where we may earn, may have revenue of no risk with no less than 20% payback ratio. And by 2020, we must be able to generate the same margin through these no-risk opportunities, no-risk revenue.
Fairly soon. If I can ask just one last question that you might have a good answer to, it is the whole issue of the private and the public sector buying into technology. Private sector, profit-based companies tend to grab on to innovation and move quickly. How quickly should the public sector move, and how can the government encourage the public sector to advance?
Это очень хороший вопрос. Вот господин Кудрин.
This is a very good question. Mr. Kudrin, he spoke here today. He has a big part of his program called State as the Platform. You know, in the processes of digitalization, they are costly. One, take a lot of time. This is number two. The larger the company is, the more significant the mistakes are. And then comes a question: how can the largest corporation of all, which is the state, how that may be digitalized? The answer is fairly simple. it should be done with the involvement of the private sector. To our mind, 60–70% of governmental services may be rendered via private platforms with a private sector involvement. And if the state, if the government is brave enough delegating some of its functions to the private sector, at least the interface in decision-making may be with the private sector. That may be a huge shift, great money saving, as well as saving a lot of time on the path of digitalization. I'm 100% confident that this may be accomplished, and we have already started working together with our partners, tax service amongst them. Mikhail Mishustin mentioned that many things may be done with our help already, but there are some things that cannot be done through private sector. Our goal is to develop such an interface that could be an easy use for a common person. We may add there everything needed in terms of AI, all the mobility, the need to scroll through apps. This would become redundant. We can build a good interface with a citizen. We would remind him or her when it's time to pay taxes, when it's time to go for the next passport, when he should extend his insurance, when it's scheduled time for the next medical check, and after the tests are done, send him to the best clinic if needed. It would be good if the person would not have to fuss between different apps, going into healthcare apps and then other apps. It would be good if there's one for him, not just unfolding his preferences, but also taking the routine, and this unproductive effort may be done by someone else. Thank you.
Care to respond to that? We're going to have to be wrapping up very soon.
1 minute.
German Graf competes. It's great that Sberbank, aiming at remaining a competitive bank, implements an ecosystem for the person. We are the same as tax service. We attempt to be invisible in the ecosystem of the humans. It should be seamless, but all according to the law. Technological solutions must be simple, and I hope that we will come there, because the breakthrough technologies of the society make it possible also for the governmental, for the regulators, and then it needs to be simplified, because simplification and minimization of the spendings, it's another trend of the modern time.
Thank you all for attending. We have to say goodbye to Mr. Graf now, but we ask the rest of you to remain seated for just a minute. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. There was a report about a year ago from McKinsey saying that emerging economy governments could save $110 billion by stopping these leaky spending and failures to collect taxes. It also mentioned that financial service providers could make almost 4 times that, $400 billion. Clearly, some of the financial service providers are looking forward to the digital revolution. We ask you to remain seated for a minute. Уважаемые коллеги, в завершении.
Dear colleagues, to conclude at the end of our plenary session, we go into the awarding session. These are the winners of the contests organized by the Ministry of Finance. The nominations of the Moscow Financial Forum for the awarding ceremony, we invite to the stage Minister of Finance Anton Siluanov. In the nomination, the best practice of financial management, the award receives the Ministry of Industry and Trade of the Russian Federation. The diploma is given to Deputy Minister Gulnaz Kadyrova. In the nomination, open budget of a constituent of the Russian Federation, the award is received by the Ministry of Finance of Krasnoyarsky Krai. The diploma is given to the chairman of the government of Krasnoyarsky region, Minister of Finance of the region, Vladimir Bakhar. The nomination, Management of Municipal Finance, the award is given to Sorochinsky City District of Orenburg region. The diploma is given to the head of the Department of Finance with the administration of Sorochinsky City District, Tatiana Tokmakova. In the nomination, usage of open state financial data, the best software or internet project that uses open state financial data, the award is granted to the autonomous non-for-profit organization, Scientific and Research Institution of Innovative Technologies. The diploma is given to the head of NII Innovative Technologies, Lilia Luchko. In the nomination, use of open state financial data, the best visual implementation prepared with the use of open state financial data, the award is given to Vagaterka Internet Resource Vesti Economy. The diploma is given to the head of the Service of Economic News of Russia 24 channel, Alexei Bobrovsky. In the nomination, usage of open state financial data, the best media material created with the use of open state financial data, the award is given to FGBU editorial board of Rossiyskaya Gazeta. The diploma is granted to the observer Igor Zubkov. In the nomination for high quality in managing regional finance, the Ministry of Finance, the award is given to the Ministry of Finance of Ryazan region. The diploma is given to Minister of Finance of Ryazan region, Mrs. Marina Naumova. In the nomination for efficient organization of inter-budget relations at the regional level, the award is given to the Ministry of Finance of Orenburg region. The diploma is given to the Minister of Finance of Orenburg region, Mrs. Tatiana Moshkova. In the nomination for the input in the development of the system of state finance, the award is given to the Deputy Chairman of the Government of Khabarovsk Region, the Minister of Finance of Khabarovsk Region. The diploma is given to Alexander Katsuba. In the nomination for the input in the development of the system of state finance, the award is given to the Deputy Governor of Belgorod Region, Head of Department of Finance and Budgeting Policy of Belgorod Region. The diploma is given to Vladimir Borovik.
Завершилось пленарное заседание.
Dear colleagues, the plenary session is over. We encourage you to come to other forum platforms. We thank the Ministry of Finance again and congratulations on the Day of Financial Worker.